Friday, 26th July, 2019, just after midnight, the streets of Chessington, southwest London, were still, almost too still. Along Moor Lane, three friends walked home from the pub. Nothing unusual. No flashing lights, no warnings, just silence. Earlier that night, there'd been a row. Sharp words, tempers raised. But it had passed. At least that's what everyone thought. Then came the headlights, cutting through the dark. This wasn't a crash. This wasn't a hit and run. This was something far more sinister. A car wasn't being used to escape. It was being used to hunt. The driver didn't slow down. He didn't stop. He didn't call for help. Instead, he vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of horror, a shaken community, and a police investigation that would expose a level of violence few could have imagined. This is the story of Liam Dent, and how a pub row spiraled into one of the most cold-blooded killings the Met Police had faced in years. To most people in Chessington, Liam Dent wasn't someone who stood out. He wasn't loud, he wasn't looking for trouble. At just 25, he was focused on building something of his own. A small Caribbean street food business he proudly called Pull Up, Fill Up. It wasn't just an idea, it was his future. Festivals, markets, community events. He was laying the foundations, step by step. Liam was also a father, a 10-year-old daughter, a toddler son. Everything he did with them in mind. Friends called him soft-spoken, grounded, determined. His partner said he was the kind of man who put family first. He lived close to Moor Lane, worked when he could, saved what he earned, and poured it all back into his dream. The van, the equipment, the startup steps. There were no reports of violence, no history with the law, no gang ties, just a young dad trying to carve out a better future for his children in the town he called home. He wasn't the kind of person anyone expected to see making headlines, but on the night of the 26th of July 2019, Liam's name would spread far beyond Chessington. Not for his food, not for his business, not for the family he adored, but because of something no one could have foreseen. Something brutal, calculated, and completely undeserved. Martin Eastwood was just 22 years old from Epsom, but by the time he climbed behind the wheel that summer night, his history already painted a dangerous picture. In 2018, he had deliberately driven into a cyclist, throwing the man from his bike, leaving him broken and bleeding on the road. His bicycle dragged for 20 meters beneath the car. A year later, he struck again, not with fists or weapons, but with a vehicle. He drove straight at a man and his girlfriend in an attempted robbery. Another near miss. For Eastwood, cars weren't a way to get around. They were his weapon of choice, a tool he used to intimidate, to injure, to cause harm again and again. Alongside him was Daniel Morris, also 22, a friend, or perhaps a follower. Quiet on the surface, but on that night he was in a second stolen car, driving in convoy. This wasn't coincidence. It was deliberate, planned. A darker move was about to unfold. Then there was Jasmine Robinson, just 19, Eastwood's girlfriend. She wasn't present on Moor Lane when it happened, but her part came after, calm, deliberate, and calculated. She would help him evade capture. None of them were hardened criminals in the traditional sense. No armed robberies, no drug networks, but their violence wasn't random. It was targeted, it was personal, and it was almost always carried out behind the wheel. By July 2019, one thing was clear. When Martin Eastwood wanted to settle a score, he didn't reach for a knife or a gun. He got into a car. What happened next wasn't an argument. It wasn't words thrown back and forth. It was something far more dangerous. That night, Liam Dent had been out with friends. Just a normal evening at the Lucky Rover, a pub on Hook Road in Chessington. They laughed, they drank, they enjoyed the night. Nothing unusual, nothing to suggest what was about to come. But outside, after closing time, paths crossed. Two groups. On one side, Liam and his friends. On the other, Martin Eastwood, Daniel Morris, and at least one more. Witnesses later described it as fast and tense, a row that spiraled in seconds. No knives, no fists. But when a pub sign was hurled, smashing the windscreen of a gray Volvo, the car Daniel Morris had been driving, it became personal. Both groups walked away. No one followed. It looked like it was over, but it wasn't. Because what no one knew was that Eastwood and Morris had more than just that Volvo at their disposal. They had stolen cars, burner cars, vehicles you don't keep. You torch them when you're done. Within minutes, they were back. Eastwood behind the wheel of a Ford S-Max, Morris close behind in a black BMW. Both on false plates. Both reported stolen weeks earlier. CCTV would later capture them in convoy, prowling through Chessington. 2 cars moving with purpose, just minutes before the hit. For Liam, for his friends, there was no way of knowing. But for Eastwood, the smashed windscreen wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 12:10 a.m. The moment everything changed. The Ford didn't slow down. It accelerated, straight at Liam. The impact was brutal. He was struck with force, knocked to the ground and dragged beneath the car. But the Ford didn't stop. It kept going. Witnesses spoke of screams, not only from Liam's friends, but from Liam himself. One remembered hearing him cry out just as the engine roared and the car tore forward. Another recalled the sickening sound, tires screeching, metal grinding, the unmistakable noise of a body being dragged along tarmac. For half a mile, the Ford S-Max thundered down Moor Lane, with Liam trapped underneath. Along that road, police would later find the trail. A single trainer, torn banknotes, his shredded phone case, and the marks of a body scraped across the asphalt. The car swerved, zigzagging at speeds of more than 30 miles an hour. And then, by chance, Liam's body was finally dislodged. Not because Eastwood stopped, but because another vehicle clipped the Ford. That car belonged to one of Liam's friends, desperately trying to stop the chase. By the time anyone reached him, it was too late. Liam was still alive, barely, but his injuries were catastrophic. Paramedics fought to help him, but there was nothing they could do. At 12:50 a.m., Liam Dent was pronounced dead at the scene. Martin Eastwood never slowed, never looked back. He vanished into the night with the Ford S-Max, the BMW, and Daniel Morris. But what he didn't realize was the trail he had left behind. A trail the police would follow all the way back to him. When police arrived on Moor Lane in the early hours of the 26th of July, the scene was brutal in its clarity. Liam Dent's body lay in the road. Officers started walking the road backwards from where Liam had been left all the way back towards Osborne Way along the route. Every few meters, another piece of evidence. The violence wasn't hidden. It was laid out almost as if marked. And then came the next discovery. Just before 2 a.m., calls came in from Cycleman Way in Epsom. A car on fire. It was the Ford S-Max, burned out, reduced to a shell. It matched the vehicle described by witnesses and caught on CCTV earlier that night. But the S-Max held something the killers didn't expect, its telematics system. Police forensic teams retrieved the black box. Inside, a complete record of the vehicle's movements, time-stamped GPS data, speeds, acceleration patterns. The data painted a detailed picture of that night's route. The exact moment the car hit Liam, how far it dragged him, where it turned, and where it stopped. They also recovered CCTV from several roads, showing the black BMW along with the Ford S-Max and a gray Volvo. The Volvo V40, seen earlier in the evening during the row outside the Lucky Rover, was later found torched on Alexandra Road in Epsom. The BMW driven by Daniel Morris had been abandoned and left intact. Bit by bit, the police stitched together the timeline. The roads, the cars, the aftermath. Each forensic detail told a part of the story, and none of it could be undone. The technology and the brutality of the scene had left a trail they couldn't burn away. In the hours after Liam Dent's killing, Martin Eastwood disappeared. The same way he had stormed through Chessington's streets, he slipped quietly away from them. He avoided his own name. He stayed away from the driver's seat, and when it came time to leave, he didn't even handle it himself. That job fell to Jasmine Robinson, 19 years old, Eastwood's girlfriend. She booked him a coach ticket to Sheffield under a false name, a carefully planned escape designed to throw police off. But while the booking details bought Eastwood a head start, what they couldn't hide was the trail of messages left behind. Those texts revealed the chaos that followed the killing. In one, Robinson snapped, "It all up. And for what? A couple of seconds of empowerment." In another, her words swung from fury to affection, blame to regret. Beneath it all, both of them knew the truth. Eastwood was trying to vanish, and she was helping him disappear. As detectives dug into CCTV, phone records, and forensic evidence, the picture sharpened. Daniel Morris, Eastwood's friend, was tracked and arrested. He later admitted his role in court. Jasmine Robinson had been more careful, but not careful enough. Police traced the coach booking straight back to her. Surveillance, transaction records, and her own text exchanges betrayed her. It was enough. She was arrested for assisting an offender, and she wasn't the only one. In the weeks that followed, 10 young people, aged just 17 to 22, were arrested. Some on suspicion of murder, others for attempting to pervert the course of justice. Most were released under investigation, but the net was tightening. The manhunt for Eastwood intensified. Movements were tracked, phone data reviewed, leads followed. The trail he thought he had buried with Robinson was still there, waiting for detectives to connect the pieces. On 15th August 2019, Martin Eastwood was finally found, arrested, charged with murder. By October, the charge sheets were written. One by one, the names whispered outside a pub became evidence in a courtroom. The net hadn't fallen in one sweep. It had been pulled slowly, deliberately, until there was nowhere left to run. His mother, Stacy Dent, was one of the first on the scene. She dropped to the ground, cradling her son in her arms. Later, she described the moment in words that cut straight through the courtroom. "When I arrived, I knew my son wasn't alive. His injuries were catastrophic, beyond anything a body could survive. They tried to save him, but I could see the absolute destruction of what had been done." In court, she turned her grief into something raw and unflinching. Speaking directly to her son's killer, she said, "I realized he had to be in so much pain. Despite the attempts to keep him with us, I knew he would not survive. My heart was completely ripped apart. It remains that way. I cry every single day. He was tortured. He was left for dead, screaming for help. Why couldn't you just stop? Why couldn't you spare my son his life?" Liam's partner, Maisie Johnson, echoed that pain. She and Liam shared 2 young children, children now left without a father. In a public appeal, Maisie's words carried both heartbreak and desperation. "My children have lost their dad. I have lost my soulmate." But despite the media coverage, despite CCTV, despite police appeals, there was a silence across the community. People had been there. People had seen. Others knew exactly who was involved, but fear kept them quiet. Loyalty kept them quiet. Some simply didn't want to get involved. Stacy confronted that silence directly. "I know people saw what happened. I know they're scared to come forward, but this was a callous crime, and I have no doubt this person will do it again." That silence haunted the family more than anything else. Through every appeal, every interview, every court date, their message never changed. They wanted one thing above all else: justice. For Liam, for his children, for the family left behind. On 6th April 2022, at the Old Bailey, 1 month after the jury returned its murder verdict, the case was set out in full for sentence. The prosecution's case was methodical. Piece by piece, they laid out the evidence we've covered throughout this story. And then came the sentences. Martin Eastwood, 22, from Epsom, sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 30 years for murder. He also received concurrent terms for grievous bodily harm with intent and robbery, and a 10-year driving ban to begin when he is eventually released. Daniel Morris, 22, of no fixed address, admitted manslaughter before the trial. He was sentenced to 5 years and 6 months. And Jasmine Robinson, just 19, from Epsom, convicted of assisting an offender. She received 2 years imprisonment, suspended for 2 years. But what do you think about these sentences? Do they deliver justice, or do they fall short? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more true UK crime stories told exactly as they happened, make sure you're subscribed to UK Crime Hub and turn on notifications, because there's always another case to uncover.